Evil Earth. First draft. Table of contents. Semantic fields. Evil, minions, creators, embodiment, deadness, precipice, earth. Evil, inflicting pain, sinner, chasm, deadness, precipice, earth. Evil, devil, proverbial, fence, teetering, precipice, earth. Evil, devil, proverbial, cliff, teetering, precipice, earth. Evil, devil, proverbial, cliff, edge, precipice, earth. Evil, devil, proverbial, cliff, edge, precipice, earth. Evil, devil, proverbial, cliff, edge, precipice, earth. Earth, planet, luckiest, scum, soulless, evil, evil, devil, proverbial, cliff, edge, precipice, earth. Mountains who, to your maker's view, seem less than mole hills do to you, are only relatively vast. Yet except for the heavens, they are the grandest, most majestic objects known to man. Above me are the Alps, the palaces of nature, whose vast halls have pinnacled in clouds their snowy scalps, enthroned in eternity in icy halls of cold sublimity, where forms and falls the avalanche, the thunderbolt of snow, all that expands the spirit yet appalls, gather around these summits. Great objects make great minds, enlarging as their views enlarge. Pliny praised the mountains for their usefulness in raising war from savagery to dignity. Had it not been for the forenamed provision of iron, steel, and brass, and such like necessary materials, instead of all this glory and solemnity there would have been nothing but howling and shouting and poor naked men, belaboring one another with shagged sticks or duly falling together by the ears at fistcuffs. Mountains are deposits of minerals and ores. iPhones subsume elements from 40 different mountain tops. Rare earth, evil earth. Vertical ascension by the body attaining analog remoteness. This peak is remote. The other peak is remote from this peak, and that remote thing over there is land. Formation of landscape. Genesis. While mountains were mentioned in connection with the flood, they were not mentioned earlier, and biblical exegetes always seized as eagerly upon negative evidence as upon positive. According then to one tradition, mountains are symbols of human sin that appeared with the deluge, monstrous excrescences on the original smooth face of nature. It should seem perplexing that the search for the origins of modern mountain attitudes should involve astronomy. Galileo's telescopic proof of the existence of the mountains on the moon afforded new arguments about mountains on the earth. There was room in this universe for all possible things, even for those men called evils. Mountains that once seemed unnatural protuberances upon the faces of the earth have become essential in a world as diverse and full as possible, a world metaphysically, ethically, and aesthetically better because of its variety and diversity. With an appreciation for irregularity and asymmetry, mountains became subjects of awe, with the newly expanded scientific mind seeking vastness and expanse, aided by the discoveries of the telescope and microscope. Optics. The mountain landscape disperses the horizon being terminated, with rocks and mountains whose tops seem to touch the skies. The horizon tries, but it's just not as kind on the eyes. The profound implications of a new astronomy were basic to our modern feeling for the sublimity of external nature. The realization of the infinite space and universe, plurality of worlds, and the eternal indefinite time enthralled people as it corresponded to the infinite God. Epigen. Geological time. The only system that survives deep time is myth. Genesis. The long now. From journey into space, we may return to Earth with new eyes. Experiencing vastness in the cosmic reaches, we may come back with new imaginations to the relative vastness of this punctual spot, our Earth. The poets of the 17th century made a transfer of vastness from God to interstellar space to the terrestrial globe, using deliberately associations to the telescope and astronomical instruments. Using the telescope for terrestrial observation. Cosmic voyagers and excursion poets took flights over landscape and over the universe, much like a modern air traveler or a UAV pilot. Gigantic landscape. In 1972, NASA released the Blue Marble, which is, according to some sources, one of the most iconic and widely distributed images in history. The photograph was taken by an astronaut on the Apollo 17 mission en route to the moon. That was the last time to this day that human eyes were at a distance remote enough to behold the whole Earth. The Blue Marble is a rectangular composition, with the Earth as seen from space at its center, surrounded by darkness. Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and a part of the South Pole are visible under a thin layer of clouds. The view of the Earth looked something like this. In most of its subsequent reproductions, the original image was rotated to conform to the cartographic standard of north-south. A distanced, superior spectator. A thrill of distance, sublimity of vastness, and the awe before infinity are diminished by the power of zoom. The images such as the Blue Marble are redundant, without the possibility of endless magnification and infinite resolution. Zooming out on Google Earth equates one visual sensation with that of the cosmonaut aboard Apollo 17. Composite images, virtual ground, telescoped optics. Verticality is where the contemporary imagination is suspended. Landed vision airborne, just like the 17th century cosmic voyagers. These windows and screens that show renditions of the whole Earth can assume various typological profiles. The dynamism of the relationship of the device of illusion and the virtual place shown, namely the rendition of the Earth as a whole, all, and any of its parts, can be still, consecutive, continuous, and sequential. The correlations of the virtual place and the physical setting in which it is experienced can be separate, protruding, and replacive in spatial terms, and as of now distinct in its temporal correlation. Such renditions have varying types of interactivity with the viewer, independent, operational, adjustable, can be manipulable and creational, but are almost always explorable. The relation of the device of illusion that fixes such a rendition and its physical setting, its position that is, can be passive, inclusive, or instrumental. The renditions are presented via devices that have distant, proximal, handheld, and maybe fitted tactile traits in correlation to the viewer. These virtual spaces can have fixed, limited, or unbound mobility, depending on the device. Earth on words. Andromeda on mountain. Mountain on earth. Smoothness of the antediluvian earth, the original earth, was annihilated by the flood, and the one that emerged was rugged and irregular. The original earth, the mundane egg, had no geography. The macrocosm reflected the microcosm, and degenerations in man were paralleled by corresponding deteriorations in the external world, amongst which the emergence of mountains was one of the most spectacular. Once a completely symmetrical, smooth, spherical, and solid orb, the earth is no longer solid or round, but marked by pockholes, the unfathomable depths of the sea, and by warts, the hills and mountains, all marring the once smooth sphere of perfection. Epigen, that which is formed or occurring on or just below the surface of the earth. Geological time. The human is a geological force. The original earth is not the world we see. The theologists made a clear correspondence of man's behavior and the appearance of the earth. Ovid implied various metamorphoses of the earth's surface. While mountains were mentioned in connection with the flood, they were not mentioned earlier, and biblical exegetes always seized as eagerly upon negative evidence as upon positive. According then to one tradition, mountains are symbols of human sin that appeared with the deluge, monstrous excrescences on the original smooth face of nature. Formation of landscape. Genesis. Man became self-conscious in the attempt to analyze the emotional experience of how nature affected the mind and how mind knew nature. Primitive peoples did not love nature. Nature must be propitiated by sacrifice. Primitive peoples understood the earth as evil. This comes down to us through myth and parable. The human is a geological force revert to evil earth optics. We have changed alongside the images that compose us. Normalization of groundless seeing is brought about by modernity's decentering of the subject parallel to our exposure to aerial images. Verticality is where the contemporary imagination is suspended, landed vision airborne. Encountering verticality, I always come to the horizon, a reference with which vanishing points concur. Within the horizon, things could be made visible. The horizon became an important tool for the construction of the optical paradigm that came to define modernity, the linear perspective. All other perspectives were deemed wrong, evil. The vanishing point gives the observer a body and position. Remote perspective is a point of view without a subject. Earth on words. Andromeda on mountain. Mountain on earth. Earth on words, Andromeda on mountain, mountain on earth. All viewing presupposes a subject, a point of view. In January 2015, NASA used the term a sweeping bird-eye view to describe the largest composite Hubble Space Telescope image ever assembled and released. The image depicted Andromeda M31, our galactic neighbor. A high-res, zoomable, swooping bird-eye view of a galaxy. Erase horizon, blue marble, and bird-eye view from almanacs, lexicons, directories, and dictionaries. It should seem perplexing that the search for the origins of modern mountain attitudes should involve astronomy. The profound implications of the new astronomy were basic to our modern feeling for the sublimity of external nature. Using the telescope for terrestrial observation, surveillance. Telescoped optics, satellites, drones, copters, cams, selfie sticks, bones, and stones, correspondence between the apparatus through which we view the earth and how we perceive it. The horizon is an abstract line terminated with rocks and mountains whose tops seem to touch the sky as the horizon tries, but it's just not as kind on the eyes. Mountains, the grandest, most majestic objects of the terrestrial world. In the mountains you see landscape. Does landscape still exist? 70% of the earth is social space, tech nature. The very act of identifying, not to mention photographing a place, presupposes our presence, and along with us, all the heavy cultural backpacks we lug with us on the trail. The trickle-down militarization leads to the aerial need for omniscience and omnipotence manifested as swooping aerial views, drone vision, drone porn, the thrill of vertical imaging capturing stunning shots like the remote view of a grid of neatly farmed plots on a beautiful day. Landscape on the brink of abstraction. The aerial drone footage is shot near the border, a formation of people moving across the green, a company 10 deep, kilometer long. Their crazed progression appears as a slow, organized flow immortalized by the smooth panning motion of the drone. The wide-angle lens is expertly pivoted on the high-end stabilizer. The shot elegantly plunges for a close-up before aerially pulling out to capture the scale of suffering in relation to the landscape. Sublime, awe, compounded of mingled terror and exultation. This scene is sequential by dynamism, separate by spatial and distinct by temporal correlations between the virtual place and its device of illusion. Depending on the device, its typological profile of interactivity can be independent, operational, and adjustable. And if we are talking about the drone pilot or the drone camera operator, then it can even be explorable. Its position is passive in relation to the device and its physical setting. For its tactility, we can say that it is distant or handheld. The viewer is limited or unbound in his or her mobility within the physical setting in which the viewing takes place. New conditions in the representation of nature, between being body and being beautiful. Landscape representation is deemed beautiful. There is a correspondence between the apparatus through which we view the earth and our perception of it. Earth gave us the apparatus. iPhones subsume elements from 40 different mountaintops. I've invested in a NeoBrain to cope with the neoscope of the neoscape gigantic landscape. Above me are the Alps, the palaces of nature whose vast halls have pinnacled in clouds their snowy scalps, enthroned in eternity in icy halls of cold sublimity, where forms and falls the avalanche, the thunderbolt of snow, all that expands the spirit yet appalls, gather around these summits. Neoscene, neoscape, neoscope, neosphere, neocosm, neochur, neobrain, neohuman, neo-Nazi. It was in 1966 that Stewart Brand protested. Why haven't we seen a photograph of the whole Earth yet? A bit over 50 years ago, humanity had never seen an actual photo of the planet. In 1972, NASA released the Blue Marble, which is, according to some sources, one of the most iconic and widely distributed images in history. The photograph was taken by an astronaut on the Apollo 17 mission en route to the moon. And that was the last time to this day that a human eye was at a distance remote enough to behold the whole Earth. As of 72, most of the images of the Earth have been presented in the remote perspective, captured by remote devices. Remote perspective is the development of new eyes, new conditions of seeing, a consciousness that can be anywhere separate. All viewing presupposes a subject, a point of view. Remote perspective is a point of view without a subject. Remote perspective is remotely articulated, operated, and automated, using the telescope for terrestrial observation, surveillance. With evil optics of the remote perspective, the biological entity that is doing the viewfinding or viewing is distanced, removed, telescoped. The remote perspective takes the form of useful tools, the hobby aerial imaging drone, the selfie stick, Google Earth, and uncounted uses of satellite images and resulting composites. The vanishing point in remote perspective is beheld and is recorded by the apparatus of the remote optics disembodied from the remote observer. The gaze is outsourced, the beholder, distanced, superior spectator. Bifurcation of the body and its optics. A second set of eyes consisting of remote lenses through which most reality is filtered. Our empathy is two-dimensional. Remote perspective seeing is a one-way loop. In order to see yourself in a mirror, you must be looking at it. Remote perspective is a system of mirrors, a serial reflection, advanced optics. Remote perspective divorces vision from bodies and surroundings and grounds it elsewhere. Remote perspective divorces vision from the body, sight from the brain, and establishes the image. Images are endowed with evocative powers to give birth to the real and to transform their makers and beholders. The sensation of the image now appears somewhere else. It is split and only joins it later. Remote viewing, remote perspective. Dronification, Google Earthization, securitization, selfization, navigation, a godlike presence at the consumer level. We are all little gods and the earth is evil. Remote perspective desensitizes. Depersonalization disorder, or DPD. People with this mental ailment have reported an experience similar to as if a little man sat in the back of my head with the controls, and you can see the inside of your skull, and you're looking out of these two eye sockets. A bird's-eye view. This condition is often triggered by anxiety and uncertainty, groundlessness, external nature, asymmetry, irregularity. The prosthetic enhancement of vision thus brings about the notion of limitlessness and unregulated gluttony that desires to see everything from nowhere, spreading the assumption that anything can and is seen. The narcissism of knowledge, the empathy through knowledge, through empathy, nothing. The remote gaze is sincere, objective, intellectual, empathic, knowledgeable. Remote perspective is archived. Remote perspective is the optics of evil earth. All other perspectives are deemed wrong. New attitude, evil earth. External nature, evil earth. Everything is a system. This exhibition is a system. Evil earth is a system. Acknowledge the inner life of all things. On one hand, rocks are like ungodly men, shameless, impudent, obdurate, proud, hard, barren, deaf, cold, dumb, and lifeless. Yet rocks and mountains are not wholly evil. This peak is remote. The other peak is remote from this peak, and that remote thing over there is land. Spatial manifesto filmed by a drone. This object represents an idealized mountain landscape, a composite image based on remote views of the Julian Alps. The object's dynamism is iterate. We have a superimposition of 4 layers whose contents, when seen in succession, seem to move or have depth. The object's spatial correlation can be separate, but due to the object's transparency, we might label it as protruding or even overlapping. The temporal correlation between the object and its physical setting is distinct. The interactivity between the viewer and the virtual place represented is either independent or explorable. The object assumes a dominant type of position in relation to its physical setting, its tactile trait is distinct, and its mobility is limited. Ovid implied various metamorphoses of the earth's surface. That is evil earth. The human is a geological force. That is evil earth. They say in the Anthropocene the human is a geological force. How does a geological force see if endowed with vision? Primitive peoples did not love nature. Nature must be propitiated by sacrifice. Primitive peoples understood the earth as evil. This communicates down to us in myth and parable, such as the parable of the gold horn. In this example of earthen chivalry, the gold horn, a symbol of the elementary nature and her riches, tempts a poor hunter to a Julian Alp precipice from which the hunter plunges to his demise after being blinded by the sun reflected off of the animal's golden horns. That is evil earth. These are brand new conditions of visuality, this verticality, composite images, virtual ground, that is evil earth. The specific smooth panning motion of drone video footage, that is evil earth. Pliny praised the mountains for their usefulness in raising war from savagery to dignity, that is evil earth. Man's desires can be developed so they overshadow his needs, tools of imaging, tools of seeing, that is evil earth. Screens needed for screen technologies that propagate the remote perspective rely on mineral resources, ores, and rare earth elements needed for their production, so contemporary optics are inseparably linked to the physicality of the earth and its resources, not only mineral, but also labor. That is evil earth. We are all little gods, and the earth is evil. Evil earth is my choice. Evil earth is the propagation of serial mirroring, a one-way loop, zero waste. Evil earth is decisions. Evil earth is semiocapital. Evil earth is the visual device by which it presents itself to itself. Evil earth is cognitive automation. Evil earth is false empathy. Evil earth is the narcissism of knowledge. Evil earth is the dealer of gold, the dealer of abundance, foods, and intelligence. Evil earth is an episode tied up in pathetic significance, a bad earth habit of its inhabitants. Evil earth is society, the planet, the soil, the time scale beyond societal imagination. What system of symbols do we use to communicate to the far future of the evil earth? The only system that stands the test of time is myth. Genesis, deep time, the long now. Earth on words, Andromeda on mountain, mountain on earth. The end of Evil Earth.